Very, very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. The numbering system on Brainfood Live is all over the place. I know you, if you tuned in early this week, it was already episode 323. We've gone back in time because it's episode 321 today. But anyway, I'm just trying to so present as many conversations as relevant and as possible and as time as we can. So welcome to the show and thanks for joining us. So today we have a new co-host, but he's a regular friend of Brain Food Live, been on the show multiple times, both as guests and everything else. So it's Ewan Cameron, CEO of Willow, of course. Ewan, great to see you, man.
Thanks for having us, Hung. And I didn't actually tell you, but I didn't shave today. I just got back from my holiday last night, so apologies. I look a little bit
Don't
rough.
worry. I've heard it said that a little bit of facial hair is good for
Is
the
it
general CEO gravitas. In fact, someone
okay?
should study this. Like, do you close more sales if you have a little bit more facial hair? Has anyone done the research on that? Um, I don't know.
I
But yeah,
don't know, but yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having us on the show. It's cool to be co-hosting alongside you today.
no worries, and great to have you on screen. And by the way, this is kind of all as a lead off from our wonderful partnership on the Wreckfest stage, which seemed like 3, 4 weeks or so ago. But wasn't that a wonderful conversation with the friends at Amazon, talking
Yeah,
about the stuff you're doing there? I wonder whether now is actually a good time to actually talk a little bit about Willow. Like, who are you? What it is you do? What did you do for Amazon? Those types of things.
absolutely. Yeah, of course. Willow. So Willow is now in its fifth year. I believe it or not, over 5 years old now. And we are essentially a candidate assessment platform now. So candidate screening and candidate assessment platform. And we're helping customers like Amazon hire at scale, which is a space that we've sort of moved into over the course of the past 5 years. We've now built in audio, video, text-based questions, multiple choice questions. So you can bake in an entire screening process into one really simple candidate flow. And that flow works on any device as well. That's the important thing here is that candidates don't need to do anything. They don't need to do anything complicated. They just click on the link, they do your screening process, and then at the other end, you can review those answers in your own time. One of the really interesting pieces we've started to really introduce this year as well is helping you detect whether AI has been used, whether scripting has been used, and actually flagging that. Our friends at Amazon are using a lot of these features as well. So they're obviously doing hiring at real scale. I think if you were at the talk, you would recall that they have done about 12,000 a quarter through Willow, so 12,000 candidates a quarter through Willow, and they're using all kinds of question types. They're using multiple choice. They're doing assessments as well in there, and they're actually doing technical assessments on graduates. So they're doing really high volumes, but it's adding obviously a lot of value to that team and saving them a bunch of time as well, which is amazing to hear. They also have a really high completion rate, and that's in large, down to just the work over the past few years to make candidates feel comfortable. Because obviously, when you say one-way video interviewing, some people on this might go, "I'm not so sure about that. I don't know if that's right for our candidates." But that's exactly what we've been working on is trying to make sure that candidates actually want to use the platform and enjoy using the platform, and then they leave with a good experience. And we don't just say that as well; we actually back that up with stats. We have a survey at the end, and it's wild to see how when you do things right and you tweak things and make things optimal for candidates, they can leave the process actually feeling like they've achieved something. They've actually completed a good thing. They've put their best foot forward, and they've got a good chance of obviously getting seen by that employer.
Yeah, and you know what, Ewan, it kind of leads us to this conversation that we're having, which is, human required. Like, what are the critical moments in the hiring process? And we'll get to that in a minute because I think we all like have the cliche of, recruitment always needs the human touch. Like that's kind of like rolled out as a mantra whenever we hear stories of AI displacing recruiters and all this. And I think we're concerned, but also at the same time, we're reaching for this cliche to say, actually, of course, it always needs humans in flow. I think they're right. I think humans are required in recruitment. But I want to use today's conversation to just get a little bit more forensic as to to try and find the answer to that question. So we can't just be satisfied with a superficial cliche. Like we need to understand exactly why we need the human. And we're going to find, I think, that it isn't always that obvious. So, for instance, doing an async video interview, a lot of people say, "Oh, that's horrible, that's terrible." Actually, in certain circumstances, yes, it is terrible. But in many other circumstances, is absolutely superior to doing a
Yeah.
face-to-face synchronous interview. I mean, I think a classic example. You correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're headhunting a senior candidate, for instance, and you've tapped them up, you've got them interested, probably deploying an async video interview in that circumstance is probably not the smartest thing, because you've come to them, you've actually
Yeah.
got them interested. That's not the obvious thing. However, if you're advertising for, let's say, a high volume role, it's a graduate entry program or whatnot, the options are, look, sit in queue for like forever, or do you want to immediately take this interview and we're going to give you a result in the within 5 minutes of you completing it, much better experience. So human, we need to think about where the human sits in all of that, because there's not always more
Absolutely.
human is better. Sometimes less human is better, but when is human better? Anyway, folks, that's the topic of the story. Willow.video, do check it out. Wonderful British company that's pulling up trees both in the UK and elsewhere. I totally forgot to talk about the sound checks, by the way, so we might have been wittering on without anybody hearing this, okay? But folks who are watching this on Crowdcast, let me know whether the audio and visual is fine. You should see me and you and on screen. We are also live streaming this on LinkedIn as ever. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, do let me know in the comments whether the audio and visual is fine. I can actually see myself on LinkedIn, so it looks okay there. I think we should be okay. Okay, good stuff. Ewan, we always talk about the newsletter real quick, so I wonder whether we
Yeah.
could just do a quick scan on last week. Did you read it? And if so, what was interesting for you, man?
I did. One of the things that blows my mind is this Google users less likely to click on links when they see an AI summary at the top. If you look at like obviously the story of Google, Google was obviously born out of Yahoo. Yahoo used to summarize content on the homepage of Yahoo, and then Google said, "Let's not just summarize it. Let's give them all the links, and they can go off and find their own stuff." We've almost seen like a full reversal where the
That's
summary is now
interesting.
on the Google page again, which is not good for publishers, obviously, and that's why the model moved away. So it feels like the internet is slightly in turmoil right now. I have no idea how that's going to play out because why would you be creating content? Why would publishers be out there pushing content out there when they're not going to be getting the eyeballs that they used to?
We're going to be talking about that next month. I've just created a new event, Brainfood Live, SEO for LLMs. What does talent acquisition and
Yeah,
employer branding people need to do in order to get into the summary? Because imagine how powerful that'd be if I was just saying, "Oh, I need an async video tool. What's available?" Boom, will pop up on the recommendation or on the AI summary, which we now know is what's being consumed more than anybody else. That's just huge. That's the new SEO. It's not the SEO because it's not a search engine anymore, but it's like AI EO or something, whatever awkward sort of phrase that is. But I think it's really important to feature in the training data if you are launching a product. And by the way, the reason why Google sat on AI is precisely because they realized this was the case. Let's not forget they invented the transformer architecture, and they were ahead of OpenAI by several years. They didn't release anything because they realized, you know what, if we deploy this, people are going to go through search and click through links. And they allowed basically OpenAI to just steal a march on them until they realized actually we've got to join in the party. So yeah, really, really interesting on this.
yeah.
So anyway, cool. Take a look at that. We're going to keep talking about SEO for LLMs in future. What else was interesting, Ewan?
So that was good. I think the other one is just generally AI. There's a lot of bad things about AI in your newsletter here. We've got some threats from BlackRock. Um, we've got obviously AI and senior recruiters. I think the threat of AI is just such an interesting topic right now. We have AI in lots of other industries too, but when it comes to talent acquisition, I don't think anyone's really figured it out yet. We're obviously we're working through it at Willow. We've got some really interesting tech, which takes the content that candidates provide. So obviously, candidates provide content to us. We have billions of minutes of video recorded every year. You can't watch billions of minutes of video. No one can. I don't have billions of minutes of time. So what we're doing is actually using AI to help compress some of that down and pull out the best parts from all of that. That's a cool use case for it, but it doesn't address the use case which a lot of people are sort of grappling with, which is can you use AI to make decisions? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. I definitely don't have an answer to that because, like, let's face it, does a human make the right decision every time? No. And is the decision really subjective? A lot of the time. Can AI replicate that? Probably. But is that a good outcome, or are we just mirroring what humans do?
Yeah, it's like which mistake do we prefer? Like, do we
Yeah,
prefer the human to make the error or the AI to make the error? I actually think we prefer the human.
yeah,
Like our tolerance for mistakes for AI is, I think, close to zero. So
yeah,
if you outsource something to AI, folks, you tell me you outsource your holiday booking to AI, it books the wrong ticket somewhere, whatnot.
yeah.
Like, would you ever
You can't
trust that
accept
ever
that.
again?
No,
No.
absolutely. It's almost
But if
unacceptable,
you
right?
but if you trusted your intern or you
Yeah,
trusted, your younger brother or something, whatever it is, and they made a mistake, you'd obviously freak out, but you
yeah,
wouldn't like go completely nuclear. You say, you know what, human error is okay. So where does the error tolerance sit with this? I think that's going to be a coming feature for how we think about artificial intelligence. Actually, I've got a product idea for
absolutely.
you, Ewan. You can say, "Hung, that's insane." But let's say you're interviewing all of these people, which you are, right? Billions of
Hmm.
minutes. Are you not tempted to like potentially do like a market research tool there? But like sneak in a question on a topic. May not be relevant to recruiting. It's okay, Pepsi or cola or something.
You know what? So it's a great suggestion, and we actually have tried this in the past. The challenge that we have is that candidates, when they're applying for jobs, really want the job. So that typically skews their responses because they see
Right.
the question and they go, if
They're
I
trying to
answer
guess
that
the right
question in
answer.
this way, I'm going to get the job. So you
Yeah,
don't get exactly what you want. You want to catch them in a different environment, where they're just walking on the street. They're not
and a
actually
different
trying to
mindset.
achieve. Yeah, they're trying to get something here. Typically, they get hired or get to the next stage of the hiring process. So they're not quite in the right mindset to be answering, neutral questions like that, which I think is quite fascinating.
Yeah, really, really interesting. So maybe there's another way to pick up that information in some way. And it's going to be related to work, isn't it? Maybe what are the things you care about, or what is it going to make you succeed or fail, stuff like that. And you could
Yeah,
surface up how they self-perceive a lot of this stuff. So
yeah,
yeah, very, very interesting indeed. All right. Cool. Let's move on to the main topic here, Ewan. The question is, where does the human matter? You're actually also not only your host, but you're also someone who's got something intelligent to say on this because you've monitored it with your product. Where do you think we overestimate the requirement for a human recruiter? And where do you think a human being truly is needed within that sort
yeah.
of hiring funnel?
Yeah. So here's what we see when we're speaking to customers and we're speaking to end users, which we do a lot of, which is awesome. And what we see is that the humans that we speak to, we call them that, the people we speak to, are over-indexing on the admin still. They're doing too much of the admin, and that's the area where I think AI can be useful. There's too much, copying and pasting, putting things in calendars, forwarding emails to hiring managers. That's like 80% of our time is spent on that. And that's the wrong place to be spending a lot of your time because that stuff isn't the stuff that's really adding the value. But it's the piece that unfortunately we're sort of stuck with because it's the piece that makes the whole thing work. And the other piece, the other 20% is the actual, reviewing the candidates, speaking to the candidates, moving into the next stage and briefing the hiring managers about how that's going to go down, making the offers. All of that stuff is sort of crammed into the end. So you do your admin all day, and then you get like some time to actually speak to a couple of candidates. And that for me really is the imbalance that I think AI can help solve. Because again, when we go back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of a lot of the mistakes that could be made can't be made in scheduling. For example, if a candidate says, I want to speak to a hiring manager at 4 p.m. today, that's a pretty easy task for AI to carry out. You can automate that really easily today with the tools that are already available. Whereas if a candidate says, I've got 12 years experience in, you know, spreadsheet management and database architecture, it's really difficult for any AI to use that information wisely because it doesn't have all the other context around it. The human,
Yeah,
the recruiter does have the context because they can remember the hiring manager saying, I really want someone with database architecture. That'd be really helpful because we have a project in 6 months' time that would need those skills, or we do a lot of spreadsheet and number crunching work in our department. All of that context is missing. And I don't know how you eke that out or you capture that context in such a way because no, what hiring manager is going to speak to your LLM and go, so this is what I'm needing and this is what I need and this is what I need. And also, how do you get the LLM to pick up on all the stuff that they don't say in the meeting that you just happen to pick up on because when you walk past their desk or you chat to them at lunch is a thing. Like there's a huge amount of context which is missing, and I don't think that is anywhere near being addressed.
that's related to a conversation we had last week. I forget what the topic was specifically, but it was exactly this. It was the information that's undocumented and almost transferred osmotically. If people
Yeah,
don't mind me saying using that term, but it's not directed at anybody. So in other words, if you're sitting next to the engineering team or whatever,
yeah,
you're doing your job, they're doing their job. They're going to say things across the air, across the desk.
yeah,
You're going to listen in and you're going to learn stuff that's important to your recruiting job
yeah,
simply by listening to that stuff.
absolutely,
And it's not directed at you. You're not maybe you're not meant to hear it, but it's going to help in some way. And of
absolutely,
course, AI is not in that position to do it. So the deeper you know your business, the stronger the context that you have. So yeah, very very interesting. Let's bring on some of our guests here. We're gonna engage in this pretty free ranging conversation. Folks, I want to get your input as well. Let me know where you think the human is most required in the recruiting process. Is there a part of the function you think, you know what, human being would definitely be needed here? Where do you think the human is overrated? What is your thinking about why the human is needed at all? Because that is also something we need to challenge. We can't assume that that's required. Hello, Angela. Great to hear from you. You're overdue a return to Brainfood Live as well, my dear. We'll have to get you back in at some point, Ange. Um, yeah, there's a few people that are like so pro automation as well, and I want to give a bit of respect to those folks as well because sometimes humans do need a little bit of bubble popping to say, you know what, you don't overestimate what you can do. Understand where exactly you do need to do it. Anyway, let's say hi to our guest, Jean-Marie Caillot. Jean-Marie, great to see you, sir. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, who are you, what it is you do?
Hello, Hank. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Well, I founded Work Me Tender. Basically, we help companies get better and smoother at recruitment. We're a consulting company, so we conduct deep analysis of everything you're doing great and everything that can be improved. Then we provide the help and training to get there. And we help the companies to stop missing the right candidates and exhausting their recruiters. And I'm also a work psychologist. And so today, as last times, I will try to bring us the scientific side of the story to the conversation.
Great stuff. I remember that conversation actually. It was one of the favorites that we did. We should bring back the entire crew for that. I forget who was actually on that show, but it was really good. Great stuff. I've just shared Jean-Marie's LinkedIn. Please do follow him. We have Mark Kunaseelan here as well. Mark, wonderful to see you as well. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
See you again, Hung, and Ewan as well. Nice to meet you,
hi
Jean-Marie.
there.
I'm Mark Kinseelan. I'm head of resourcing at University of Arts London. Been in resourcing for over a decade. Started off in employability, welfare to work, so not your typical agency recruiter turned in-house, sort of different leaf. Pretty much spent most of my career since I've been in-house in public sector, and here I'm in a charity. So yeah, been really interested in AA for nearly 2-3 years now. And like Ewan really became fascinated a long time ago. So seeing the personal interest in AI, also as a father thinking, what does the future look like for my son who's going to be growing up in this new Gen AI world? You can actually, I need to focus on my day job first, and then Well, I also haven't shaved today, so joining the club. But Jean-Marie, I think you have, so you're probably the only one.
Super relevant, by the way. There was a really good post by Richard Bradley, who I'm going to promote in Recruiting Brainfood this Sunday, exactly about this point. Father of three, kids are growing up, and he's thinking, okay, I'm in the business. I want to kind of implement tech. I want to do all of this, but what's the future looking like for these young men coming up into the world of work? And yeah, there's no easy answers. We can't be overly comfortable with it. At the same time, we can't be like, the sky is falling in either. Like, we have to find a way to be realistic, but also keep the positive energy so that it translates into action, and we don't sort of end up into, you know, a lack of basically don't fall into despair simply because we don't see the obvious future ahead right now. So we all got to juggle those things. Okay, JM, let's go to you first. Where is the human needed in the recruiting process? Have you thought about what does the psychology tell us about, you know, when we want this? Because I'm suspicious of people say, yeah, we always want the human touch. Actually, no. You know, candidates hate recruiters. Like, if you just search on Google, like, they really don't like the experience. Is it always a good thing to be on the phone call with a candidate? Oftentimes, you know, candidates don't want to speak to us. So psychologically, what's the moments that it's important for a human being to be there?
Well, that's the trickiest question, actually. That's why this topic is super interesting. So before I talk psychology, you know, the thing is, what I see is tons of CEOs and executive committees asking their HR department to add as much AI as they can to their processes. And this is the first question that they ask themselves, like, okay, but where do I start? Where do I put the AI? Where do I put the tools? And so yeah, there are two paths to follow if you want to ask the right question. First is, what do my recruiters know to do, how to do well, but don't enjoy doing? Because, you know, sometimes you make the mistake of adding an AI tool, but it's just adding a new technique or a step that you don't master yourself as a person. And the second one is, so what does the science say about this? So to give you an example, we have like 26 studies showing that the more detail you give about a negative answer to a candidate, the higher the candidate satisfaction will be. And you know that for one candidate that you hire, there will be like 100 that you will say no to. So you might want to implement an AI that takes the interviewer's reviews and craft a negative answer based on that. But you know that the reviews won't be ready, they won't all be there, and that you can still find stuff that shouldn't be there within the reviews. So it's not just like which parts are okay to automate or to put through AI or an LLM. It's really, how do I maximize this part, which is really important, human interaction, while leveraging AI. So I was talking about that, for example. So everything candidate experience, I see tons of people who are thinking, okay, I have lots of candidates, hundreds, thousands. How do I automate my communication with it? So the thing, what we have into the research, the research is fairly new on that. It's less than 5 years, of course. But what we can see is that people tend to don't care talking to an AI during a recruitment process, as long as the news are good. And from the moment you're delivering the bad news, then they get really pissed off, because they think that their application has not been taken care of properly, because it's just a tool behind. So that's why it's tricky, because if you want to add a new step, you always have to have like a human option at some point. You know what I mean?
Really good. Let me just full stop at this point, Jean-Marie, because it's a really interesting point, isn't it, folks? You're talking about human beings, candidates, very happy to deal with AI when it's all positive information. Hey, Mark, you've done great. You're through to the next stage. Fantastic. Hey, I love your profile. It looks great. We're kind of like okay with this. But it all goes wrong when there's a full stop. Hey, listen, you've not been successful. And that's when you have to take care. Doesn't mean you drop a human in, but it does mean you can't be so confident that the automation is going to produce a satisfactory outcome. And we've actually seen that back in the Mobley versus Workday case. Now, this is pre-AI, but I think the psychology is the same. Like he got annoyed because he did get rejections. He got them too quick. So he was getting a negative outcome, which he didn't get the job. He got an email rejection. That's best practice, folks. Like he was in a black hole. So all of these companies set the right thing. They rejected the candidate. He got that too quickly because he was like, apply. 2 seconds later, a reject. He immediately thought, okay, I've been unfairly treated, and he's brought a court case, which could be the Jean-Marc Bosman of recruiting technology, right? Completely changed the game. So if you're going to deliver the bad news, you've got to consider, should a human being step into that? Mark, that's all well and good, but that's unrealistic, isn't it? Because you've got thousands of candidates. Are we actually saying you should get on the phone call for every rejection? That can't practically happen, right?
That's impossible. I mean, last year we had over 35,000 applications, which for some people on the call is probably a small amount, and for others probably a lot. But considering we only had about 22,500 the year before, that's a big increase suddenly in volume. We haven't grown our team. Our processes haven't been adapted to deal for an unexpected increase. But it shows, your employer brand, that's the counter effect. You do more on employer brand, you do more on advertising the EVP, you try and do better adverts, you try and deliver better candidate experience, but then actually you find you're attracting even more and more people. So that's a flip side of, actually, can AI help you reach the right balance between candidate numbers, candidate quality, and that funnel that you want all year round, whether it's for a role today, 6 months, workforce, and trying to connect all those dots. You're going to need both. I think you need a blended approach. You need a bit of AI over here to help with that data decision making, being consistent, but then you need that human touch to ensure there's empathy within that. There needs to be a bit of empathy, because an AI might say, hey, do you know what? You can probably remove a quarter of your workforce because we've got tools here that will deliver all that work, all those people. But then actually, is your NPS score going to go down? Is your customer experience, candidate experience going to go down? That I don't think can quite get the nuance. So you still need that personal touch to say, hey, actually, we've got this data, great, summarize it for me. So if you want a detailed report for C-suite, you've only got 5 minutes, great, do it for me, provided there's nothing sensitive. But actually, that human touch. I was at an event recently, and I said, I don't think AI is going to replace that human connection. So if you're a line manager doing, I don't know, executive search, you might see like a candidate pack. Hey, there's a letter from your future line manager, and everybody's not going to do that. You'll know if is this my manager, or is this just generic statement that's just been written and doesn't reflect who I'm going to be talking to, working with, partnering with, growing with. So I think there's a bit of a challenge, I think, but I'm going off topic, so I'm just going to draw a line there.
No, no, very good points, Mark. Very good indeed. It's like there's certain moments when the human connection is needed. And I just wanted to know, like, where in that flow does it exist? There's a trade-off, right? And there's a trade-off on both sides. Like, oftentimes a candidate doesn't want to necessarily have a human connection with somebody, particularly at the beginning of the funnel. So I'm a candidate, I'm looking for jobs. You know what? I'm going to apply for 100 jobs today, because I'm active. But do I really want 100, connections with human beings? I don't have the time myself, right? So we've got to sort of have a situation where maybe the human comes in a little bit deeper in the hiring funnel. Would that kind of be fair to say? So we have a big bulk at the top where it is both sides are trying to do quantity. We're all using tools to increase the applicant is increasing using tools to increase the applicant rate. We on the candidate and on the hiring side are using tools to try and like reduce the numbers that we're looking for. And then it's only when we've kind of whittled down that initial group do we then think, okay, now we need to come in and offer a conversation. You and Cameron, when should a company offer the human option, given the fact it's unrealistic to do it at volume? Like, when should we say, hey, would you like to speak to a human being?
So I think it depends a lot on the role. If there's high volumes, then probably after the screening stage would make sense. But for a lot of our customers, they actually offer it at the screening stage. They offer the choice. And I think JM mentioned that earlier, like choice is really important here. Giving the candidates the option of a one-way recorded interview or speak to a human, that is enough from what we see. That's enough to actually keep both sides happy. The candidates that want to speak to people and the candidates that don't want to speak to people. And we've seen much better outcomes from that. And that's obviously just human nature. Having choice is far better than being forced down one path.
Okay, that's another full stop. I hope someone's making notes. So if Jean-Marie's come up with the idea of, look, negative feedback, negative scenario, this is where you got to step in and potentially give a human. And you're saying actually the offering of a choice, so even the illusion of choice, if you want to be cynical,
Yeah.
is this is what kids know, right? It's like, do you want the
Yeah.
red car or
Which
the blue
outfit are you going to
car?
wear today? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Which outfit is your preference? Don't give them free reign. Never going to get out of the
Yeah.
house, but you constrain the choice and you give them a sense they've actually contributed to their
Yeah.
day. Then that makes the difference. So the offering of a choice, do you want a human or the and in fact, I think this is how a lot of the high volume sort of AI assessors get through it to date, isn't it? You say, hey, listen, you can go through traditional process. However, caveat is it's going to take time because we're processing all of these candidates manually. Or you go the automated process, you're going to get a result in within a minute of your completion. What would you prefer? Clearly, everyone goes to the option, and yeah, the provision of choice. Jean-Marie, why is agency important for a human being? Like, why is because practically nothing's changed. So why is that important?
That's a very good question. I just want to add to what Johan just said about the choice. I love the idea. I know what the main issue with that it is technical. Most ATS are not able to provide with a good experience to have like a dual step within the same process. So business ID, ATS's tool, if you hear us or watching us, this is something that we need. Being able to like branch out and then branching back into a process. So what we know, in terms of interaction, well, it's all about candidate experience, what we're talking about. And I'll give you an example with the assessment step. That concept coming from the psychology of assessment that is named predictive validity. Like it's how well my process or my step within the process is able to predict the success of someone once they're hired. Well, what most people don't know is that as a candidate, I do have a concept of validity myself, which is called face validity. That is, in my mind, as a candidate, how much do I feel like this recruitment process or this step is relevant? How much is it assessing my skills? And do I feel like I've been given a real chance to display what I can do and do my best? And so face validity, it's tough to measure, but it's always there. It's always in the corner of your candidate's mind. And so you gotta think about the candidate perception. And despite everything, what research shown, and this one, it broke my heart a bit. Research showed that candidates perceive non-standardized interviews and unstructured process as better from their point of view than structured interview. Even if we know that we need structured assessment, to make the best possible decisions, they prefer when it feels, I'm not going to say more chaotic, but the more natural, as natural as possible.
Yeah, and like an informal chat, right? So every candidate, you prefer informal chat? Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
But we're piling them through behavioral interviews. Go on.
So the real trick as a recruitment director or recruitment manager is to be able to standardize your process and use the tools while not making it too obvious to the candidates. And that's the real challenge. And that's if we manage to do that, then we can manage to automate tons of stuff. But the candidates, and of course, we still need to be honest and true to our candidates. And so they need to know if they're talking to a real person or a robot. But basically, when it comes to recruitment, it's really about if they feel like they're given a chance or not. And it's quite the same when we were just talking a few minutes ago about the rejection. It's all about them in the end. It's normal, it's their recruitment process. It's their opportunity to get the job.
All right, two great ideas here. Number one, validity of the assessment. Mark Kunasilan, I'm sure you've had to think about this as well. it complicates the job as head of TA, doesn't it? Because it means that if we take this concept on board, we need to obviously have like differentiated assessments according to the role. And that makes sense to me, but that's huge more workload. Like it's so much easier if you just said, look, here's the standardized thing, everyone does it, take or leave. And it's great for salespeople, but guess what? Your tech people, actually have contempt for that process. And in fact, maybe that combination is accurate because that example is accurate because an interview is often engineers, people who are technical, oftentimes have contempt for an interview because they think, what am I, this is not my job. I don't, this is not how I do my job. Plus the person interviewing me, how is he or she possibly going to find information that justifies how I do my job? Whereas sales guy or salesperson is going to say, yeah, of course, I love it because this is I'm good as my comfort zone. Plus your ability to communicate in that setting is directly relevant to your capability as a worker. Mark, as a guy that's responsible for putting all this together, how do you go about variation of assessment types according to the role? Where do you make the compromise?
So I look back at my whole career, I've pretty much recruited nearly a lot of industries, and you're right about that bit about the role. But what I've gathered is actually you need a little bit of trust with the hiring manager. So look where we are. I'm in education, it's also a charity sector. If we're looking at a lecturer, for example, one of our assessments is what we might call a micro teach assessment, where they do like a mini session for students, because actually the core of their work is about actual role duties. And I think if you stem the assessments to be about the actual role they're doing, so there's no point, for example, testing an engineer on how they can speak to a group of students, for example. Actually, you want to see what they're like technical with their hands or their coding skills. Put them in front of the computer, do it, a coding test, paid programming test, whatever it might be. Do it live, especially with AI now. I've seen one of your previous hunger, someone cheating on live on an interview. You think, actually, you want them in person, what they're doing, what they're capable of. And, you can talk about both pros and cons about that and whether that job will be replaced in the future. But it's trusting the hiring manager, looking at the role as well. They've got expertise in that role. You might look at the JD, person spec. All right, here's your list of criteria. This is the unicorn that you really want. Actually, what do we want to test at the different stages? So the initial stage, so we've got like a skills framework. It's linked to our higher education skills framework. So these are the areas. It's a mixture of hard skills, experience, knowledge, and qualifications, and then your soft skills, communication, leadership and management, planning, managing resources, teamwork, problem solving, a couple of others that are academic focused. So you think, well, actually, let's only test a few of these at this initial stage, and then we'll test these others or go into even greater detail. And then in between, you think, well, hold on a minute. How many candidates do we have? We haven't got many. Great. Are any of them internal? Do we have any redeployees? Because redeployment, internal mobility is another thing. And a bit that you said, Ewan, earlier on, having a different process. For redeployees, do we want them to have the same lengthy process that externals might have to go through, as opposed to someone that knows that internal culture, who might know the processes, who might know policies, who might know systems, and all those internal things that actually puts them at an advantage. So trying to navigate all of that, it's about looking at the role. Is it internal only? Is it only for redeployees as a first glance? Or is it open to everybody out there? Are we going to get external candidates? Look at apprenticeships. All the years I've been doing apprenticeships, you get hundreds and hundreds of applications, even within a day. And you're suddenly like, hold on a minute, this is even more than a standard role for the same type. So you've got to your assessment centers, but assessment centers take a lot of time, effort. How can you be consistent? Having equity and equality are two different things that I've seen sometimes you can't quite get right. And again, it depends, what type of apprenticeship is it? If it's your example hung with Lee, if it was a sales apprenticeship, well, actually, what do they really need to do? Gift of the gab? Well, you might not put that down, but have they got gift of the gab? And are they a people person? Because those are essentially two of those things. And do you trust this person? And that's the bit in this whole debate around, you bring AI in. Is it trustworthy? Can you trust how you use AI? It doesn't matter what's in your previously notice. Do you trust it is going to treat you fairly and equitably, as opposed to a human making that same decision? So at the moment, we are fully people assessed. We plan to stay like that for the foreseeable future, because until AI can look at all these different types of roles, whether it's estates, professional services, finance, lecturer, whatever the type of role is, until you can trust that a tool can look at all those nuances, like you said earlier on, as Jean-Marie said earlier on as well, you don't want to open the floodgates and the doors to something that could, there'll be a lawsuit on your hands and everyone's a bit frightened. So I think it's around trust in that.
And there's trust, there's multiple ways in which we can think about trust as well, whether you trust the AI to be accurate, but also whether you feel it's possible to build a trust relationship with the candidate. And that is suddenly like a very dynamic and contextual thing, in the sense people aren't walking around with trust as an attribute. Trust is a description of a relationship between two people or more people. So it has to be within context. So somebody in one team might be perceived to be a trustworthy potential, but in a different team, the same person may not have that same description. The relationships would be different. So always embedded in context. But there's a practical problem there, isn't there, guys? I mean, with regards to, we want to be, customize the assessment in every case. We want to get it as close to real world as possible, et cetera, et cetera. That helps the candidate, helps the hiring manager, of course. However, untenable at any sort of scale. So where is an acceptable middle ground? An understanding that this is not like ever going to be a perfect solution, but where do we come to? Does anybody sort of have a method to get to that middle ground?
Before we get to that method, can we add like a third dimension? So we're talking about like the tools, we're talking about the need for efficiency. But there's one thing that we haven't discussed is what do your recruiters like to do? Because of course, for all the answers that we're going to have to our questions, there's no one size fits all. But like, if it's granted that we will still have recruiters, or at least HR people, managing some parts of the recruitment, we need to take into account what they like to do. Because like, if I'm going to take your analogy with a salesperson, if we start hiring salesperson, telling them, okay, you're just going to do like lead generation, then you leave out to the tool and you come back just to sign the deal, and you will not have talked to your potential clients. Well, you know that what they like most is talking to the potential clients. So you know what I mean. So we need to think about the recruiters too. Of course, if they are not meant to completely disappear, but I'm one of the people who thinks they're not completely disappear.
But do you know what? That's very interesting. I don't know whether anybody else saw that study a couple of weeks ago where they talked about where AI was actually being used and the attitude of the workers that were witnessing this. And actually, the majority of workers said that AI was automated in the stuff that they wanted to do. It was like, like the creative composition. And it was like, oh, wow, that's crazy, because it seems that we are what AI basically, I think what's happening is that we're adopting AI to the places where it seems most capable, irrespective of thinking whether human beings want it to be there or not. And then it's like, okay, actually the job is getting denuded of things that the humans want to do. And what are you left with? You're left with actually a husk of a job that actually is very, monotonous, boring, whatever it might be, but human beings don't want to do it. So of course, performance will then degrade, because one of the things we're not thinking about is the impact on the incumbent worker. Yeah. Does it actually degrade that person's performance? Just because the AI can cycle faster doesn't mean the human being is going to feel better for it. Okay, folks, we are rapidly, look at the time, it's 2:45 already. This is obviously a conversation that needs to continue going, and we will continue going, but very important that Brainfood Live does not become a bottleneck for any conversation. We're here to start the conversation, not end it. So if you want to continue a conversation of this type after we come off air, now is the time where you've got to connect with everyone else who's joining this conversation. So grab your LinkedIn URL, stick it in the chat stream if you're watching this on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, pop it in one of the comment threads on LinkedIn, and then connect to everyone else who's done the same. I say the same speech every single week. And the reason why I do it is because I fundamentally believe the stronger the network you have, the better equipped you're going to be to deal with this AI-enabled future. You're building access to collective intelligence. That's the antidote. If it's not the supplement, it's the antidote too. artificial intelligence, access to the crowd. That's what you need. Connect with everyone who you see do that. Okay, let's move on swiftly. Let's redesign a recruitment flow, high volume recruitment flow. Okay. I'm putting an ad out. I'm getting 1,000 applicants through the pipe. That's what's happening. Where am I deploying AI in this, and where does the human being intercede? So I want to basically see, where do we definitely need a human being?
Yeah.
How does it look? Mark, let's go to you first. You might actually be needing to do this, so you probably put some thought on this.
Yep.
You're getting these applications. Where do you see AI definitely taking on bulk of the job?
So I'll look at something I see my ATS provider, Olio. They've got something at the moment called Skills Assess that they're adding in. Take a skills framework. They can look at candidates' answer and underline the bits where they say they've actually answered what you're looking for and give it a recommended score. But they still need you to do that human independent review first. And then you're using it as a sense check. Are you being consistent in your scoring? So if you've got 1,000 applications to quickly screen, you're going to get something called recruiter fatigue, or whatever you call it at the end of the day. By the time you've done 300 in one day, you're tired, you're fatigued, you've got other priorities, you've got other, requisitions open, you've got meetings to go to. If you're working from home, you might have distractions, little one running in, etc. You're going to get tired. Actually, that is where I see, do you need it as a sense check? Or do you need it to quickly win through all those who, they just don't meet the requirements full stop? Or I know when I've been a hire manager and, it might be 3 competency questions I've asked. Great, I can gauge your experience, knowledge, qualifications from your CV or your application form, but I want to answer some real meaningful questions linked to our skills that we're looking for, your soft skills. Please see my CV, please see my CV, please see my CV. I've seen that so many times with candidates that look great on a CV, but it shows they're not putting that time and effort in. AI could help automate the candidate and help give them a little bit in that way in terms of applying. But I want to hear from you. I want to know, how are you meeting that criteria? So when you've got hundreds, I think AI can quickly look it down. Don't bother with these. They haven't bothered or haven't put the effort in, or just don't meet your essential criteria. It's a yes, no when it comes to essential criteria. You look at things like disability confidence scheme. You've replaced the guaranteed interview scheme 2016, 2017. But you look at the guidance, is if you've received the high volume applications, you can't possibly interview every candidate that meets the criteria. So what AI could do is actually say, right, here's the top scoring DCIS applicants, invite them to the next stage. Here's your highest scoring non-DCIS applicants, invite them to the next stage. Whereas as a human, you might be more biased to think, actually, I think these are the better scoring, but actually they don't quite meet. So I think the early funnel is where I see the most value. And I see the least value, towards the end of the process, until you get to
Yeah,
onboarding.
I think
Sorry.
that's right. Sorry, yeah. So basically, I think, do we all agree with this, by the way? I'd be interested to know what everyone thinks. Like, top of funnel, high volume, basically AI to screen the candidates, not to basically on the knockouts. We're saying who
Yeah.
is the obvious yes and who's the obvious no's. And by the way, I think human psychology is like this. When a human being is reading CVs, a human recruiter, I think it's a tandem process. You basically eliminate knock out the ones definitely no's. You're saying yes to the ones that definitely yes, and then you've got a big pile of maybes, and then you spend a long time looking at the maybes. So maybe AI could do that, like do the 3-part type sort at the top of the funnel, and then human beings come in at another phase. Okay, you were nodding your head on
Yeah.
this. What would you add to that commentary that Mark's just laid out there?
So thanks. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Mark. And what's exciting about this question is this is what we help customers build every day. So getting from 1,000 to the top 10% is essentially what we sort of see it as. And exactly to your point, Hung, we're helping find the absolute rejections. So they don't speak the language, they don't have the driver license that you need, whatever it is, they're just immediately gone. Then you have a bunch of maybes in the middle, which need to be seen by a human. And then we help surface that top 10% of people that you really want to spend your time on. That's the screening, that's the sifting, however you want to put it, but that's what Willow's essentially doing. And AI really helps with the bulk of the no's at the very start. That's the part, if you don't do that effectively with AI, you just erode confidence in your recruitment team, because they're just going through and they've just applied with AI, they don't even have a driver's license, we need a driver that can drive a DPD van. And you just do that all day long, and that just erodes the confidence. And then when you finally get to that top 10%, you're worn out because you spent all day rejecting because they can't, because they're literally knockout.
Yeah, and but by the way, folks, anybody saying a human being needed here, the reality is a human being's kind of ability to effectively assess is going to degrade very rapidly, as Mark
Yeah.
mentioned. Like, in fact, JM, is there any studies to how many CVs a recruiter can look at before the brain fries on a 24-hour basis?
On the top of my mind, I don't know about any studies, but from my time as a recruiter and as a recruitment director, I could say that it's not we all know that it's not the recruitment steps that most recruiters like, the most. What's interesting about that part specifically is it's still the training step for all junior recruiters. Like, imagine you are new at recruitment.
True.
You couldn't immediately go through the next step of doing the phone screening and then the interviews. You need to go through the CVs to understand the mechanism that we've all been taught. So like Mark and Johan said, it's something that needs to be paired between AI and the recruiters. And I like your idea of having a tool that goes through first sorting method, and then the recruiters comes and after and checks everything. But regarding reading between the lines, I've always been very critical over the past few years on AI tools that were trying to sort the CVs. I'll be honest with that, because it was mostly based on keywords. Then it was based on links between the keywords. And lately, I could see, I'd say, I'll be bold and say, since the beginning of the year, I can see that LLMs are starting to read between the lines. And I think that's very interesting, because that's what's missing within this tool, being able to read between the lines. This is where the real value is for a recruiter who's doing the CV screenings. And I think that we are getting there. So we're not there yet, but I think that we are.
Yeah, they can read it better, absolutely. And Jean-Marie, you keep kind of introducing some really interesting sidebars that we need to explore. Like, the seniority of the CV reviewer is relevant here, because what is the domain knowledge? Firstly, their capability of doing it, but secondly, that's the training, isn't it, for a recruiter? It's you're the amount of CVs you're reading early on in your career are actually voluminous, because actually by doing that, you're educating yourself on the domain, because you're looking at all of this text. So I wonder whether we're thinking about this when we're implementing, let's say, the AI reader. You know what? That's great for your mid-career experienced recruiter. But what's happening to the junior person? I mean, that's classically one of the problems, where actually the repetition, the boring stuff is in fact training. It's dual purpose. We're not only doing the process, we're actually trying to train the human with it. How we're going to do that, I don't know. Maybe we have to have one of those built-in things that plug the young kids in the Matrix as they're sleeping and just pipe it into them.
No, but maybe the future is an augmented screening. It's not just AI or just a recruiter, but an augmented one. You're going through the screening, and even if you're a junior recruiter, but you will have a tool that tells you, hey, you didn't see that, but I think that you should check that on the CV that you just discarded, because you discarded it, but there was an information that could have been of interest for this role. And that could be super interesting to have a tool that doesn't do it for you, but that's just here as a safeguard. You know what I mean?
Just adding that point about safeguarding, just conscious of time as well, and probably want to wrap up, Hang and you. So my wife is a global customer success director, background screening. She's worked on some really, really big international and global accounts, especially in IT and fintech. Onboarding is going to be the other bit. So that bit about safeguarding, onboarding is where AI is going to add the most value. So it's the very beginning of the funnel. And at the very end, once they've completed that initial funnel, onboarding, do they have the right to work globally? AI is going to be able to do that quicker, faster, and probably more trustworthy than humans trying to remember what's the jurisdiction in Germany. All right, you got the Works Council. What about in India, for example, where checks aren't quite as speedy as going on to HMRC and confirming someone's employment? So that is the other bit of the total other end that I don't really see much about or much focus on. You've got platforms like Zinc, which are really doing great, but are they focusing too much on automation and not adding that human value bit in? And that's the bit I think we're also going to see it in at least the most value right at the beginning and at the end of that candidate experience. So, yeah.
That's a really important point. Like, there's so many. This is exactly what I want. The visualization of this at the very top, the acquisition angle, particularly when it's advert inbound, right? So, I'm not talking about external outbound. I think that's a different play. Inbound, that's heavy AI automation, onboarding. That's We've been terrible for onboarding for ages with human beings doing it. So, I think
Yeah.
absolutely automated solutions will be better there. Let's bolt that in. What about where it exists within the flow? So let's get a little bit more granular. I don't want to say, yes, we need a human being to replace the interview, or the AI to replace the human interview. But what are the moments within an interview? We talk about rejecting someone, for instance. When is an automated rejection okay? Like, is there a situation when that's the case? And when is it not okay? Can we come up with some sort of heuristic as to when that is? Any thoughts?
I
So
mean, I
this is
think
post.
personally, I was just going to say, I think personally speaking, it needs to be when it's really, really clear cut that this person isn't a fit. So it's typically going to be the knockout questions that AI is sifting for. There's too much like context that's lacking to go any further than that. I think it needs to be really clear stuff. Like, yeah, like I said, is the person able to speak the language you need for the role or something similar? That's so obvious that the AI can't get it wrong.
So yeah, all right. So we're confident AI is a yes, it's a yes no decision. AI
Yeah.
can deliver that as a rejection. That should be fine. Where the candidate has got a legitimate case to argue, and this, you know what I mean, it looks okay. They're kind of thereabouts, but you know what? You have to choose one or the other. When that's the case, then maybe the rejection needs to be more human. Let's say. But is it still required? Let's say, I don't know. There could be, for instance, a high volume situation where you're hiring for one person, 500 people apply, 300 are actually okay. You can't be like speaking to 300 people, right? So that I don't think entirely applies. Mark, you're nodding your head. What are your thoughts? Like, when does a human need to come in, and include the practical elements on this?
I think just any final decision making across each stage, I think humans should be the last point of call, even though we're going to have biases. But I think let AI do that first sift, but don't let him make decisions. Let it advise, give you guidance, do that. These are the yeses, these are the nos, these are the maybes. Actually, these are some wild cards. For human touch, some of my best hires have been wild cards in previous organizations. The AI and paper might have thought, well, they don't meet really all the criteria, but they've done enough to get through that first sift, and the interview, they've blown every other candidate away. I don't think AI has been necessarily taught, correct me if I'm wrong, on maybes and nuance. So you do your maybes, they could be some of your best hires who could be your best quality hire. Potential is going to be great down the line. They go on, they succeed, they move up the chain. But actually, AI might be only focused on the role. So I think first sift, yes, absolutely. But let the second sift or final decision be human based. And I think that's going to be the right blend. I think a blended approach is the best one.
Yeah, really interesting on wildcard hiring. In fact, I just got notified by Jamie Leonard at Wreckfest that Rory Sutherland's talk is now available on YouTube. And he was talking exactly about that. He was saying problem with he was making that exact point, Mark. He was saying artificial intelligence is going to screen for what it thinks is optimal. That's all well and good, but that presumes you know what you're looking for. Oftentimes you don't. It's like, particularly for a completely new role. Let's say I'm hiring for a prompt engineer, or I'm hiring for an AI operations lead. Like, the job hasn't existed long enough for there to be enough data to tell me what a good candidate is. I'm gonna have to sort of at some point throw something at the wall. And by being kind of allowances for imprecision in doing recruiting, I think you're going to make some spectacular mistakes, but I think you'll also hit some like remarkable moonshots that otherwise you wouldn't get because the person actually doesn't fit the spec. Jean-Marie, you've got something to say here.
Oh, I was agreeing with you, and most of the time, the human touch is not something that we put in the process. It's just a surprise that comes out of it, and hopefully it will be a good surprise. We have to remember that we don't master at least 50% of what happens during the recruitment process, no matter how well our process is structured, how well we do our briefings with the hiring managers, our assessments and everything. At least 50%. This is like all the research that had been done, including by Google already 15 years ago. We can't do better than 50%. So it's either we throw the coin, or if we decide to put tools within the process, it should be like augmenting that number first, but then if we keep the human touch, and of course we will need to keep it, and I'm willing to bet on this, we need to keep it for the good stuff, like for the good moments. And the good moments are also I'm going to say good moments and the bad moments, but when you need to discuss with the hiring manager and come back saying, listen, what you want is not what you need. And we've been through the market and we can't find it. And I think that AI can help, because you will get data more easily to have these discussions, and discussions that can be difficult sometimes with hiring managers. But then you come with you get the information in your hand, and the discussion becomes a bit easier. What my final thought would be on that is you got to use AI for the steps that are 100% sure of, I said, not delivering bad news, not impeding your recruiters to create a bond with the candidates during interactions, and not adding, it's super important, not adding steps or techniques to the processes that aren't mastered by the recruiters. And I think that apart from that, it's free game.
Really interesting. I'm going to throw a wild card myself into this conversation, which may lead us to another show, actually. But John Blastalica, our good friend John Blastalica, mentioned something really interesting, a concept called intentional inefficiency in recruiting. And his claim was that relationship building is inherently inefficient. And I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, you know what, he's got something there. Because, like, look at how we do Zoom calls, for instance, right now. Everything is a great meeting and a Zoom call always has agenda, a bullet points, who's in the thing, and a time sort of boxed, right? 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, and also, okay, action points afterwards. Brilliant for efficiency, guys. Brilliant. You get stuff done, no doubt. Are you building relationships there, though? No, you're not. Your relationships get built when there's like an open-ended, hey, listen, let's go shoot the breeze, let's go for a walk. So in other words, we need to break out of the agenda. We need to break out of constantly optimizing for productivity in order to build relationships. So maybe another part where the human being needs to drop in is, when is the relationship building component important? I think, example, intake meeting with hiring managers, not just like transference of information. He or she's got to build trust with you, and vice versa. So that's an inefficient process. It should be inefficient. If you're spending 3 hours with that hiring manager, brilliant, because it means that you're building a lot of trust. You're going to improve your hiring rate compared to just 15 minutes. Got the information, I'm out of there. Maybe similar with the candidate. Let's say deeper down the process, they're making a decision, they're talking about the contract, the offer, etc. Is that going to be done by an AI? I've got a feeling the human being might be the right person to get involved there. So that's something to chew on. Maybe it's a topic for another time, but we have to come off the show because time is up. Everybody, thanks for watching. Let's say thanks to our guests. Wonderful to have everyone on here. Mark Kunis-Seeland, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. We should talk about public sector hiring. We know about that topic. We're going to get that on the show later on this year for sure. I say goodbye also to Jean-Marie KO. Great to see you as ever, JM. We'll catch up soon. Maybe we bring you back for another one soon, actually. There's a RecOps thing coming up. Maybe that'll be relevant for you as well. And we have to say goodbye also to Ewan Cameron. Ewan, wonderful to see you as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Londres. We'll catch up soon, man. Thanks for being co-host for me today.
Thank you. That was fun. Have a great Friday.
Good stuff, folks. That's it. We're out. Willow.com. By the way, willow.com. No, willow.video. If you're looking for an async video hiring solution that is proctored against candidate fraud and also has extremely high candidate NPS score. Useful, I think, for anybody doing high volume hiring. You want to retain the human touch, but candidate experience is fundamentally about efficient process at the early stage of the flow. So do check out that product. Okay, we are out, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week as ever. By the way, people talking about Randstad and Monster. I'm actually interviewing Jeff Taylor, the founder of Monster, I think in 2 weeks' time. So make sure you register for that show. We're going to be talking about his new product, but also about the situation at Monster, of course. Next week, we are back. We're going to be talking about recruitment operations. Is it the new AI operations function? So in other words, RecOps. It's all about enabling other recruiters to be more efficient. Who else is going to transition into being the function that uses artificial intelligence to automate workflows for us? We're going to be talking to 3 heads of recruitment operations for that show. Make sure you sign up for it. It's going to be one of the best for you. Okay, that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're watching this on Crowdcast, follow the channel if you want to get updates on this. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, follow my page on LinkedIn. I live stream on LinkedIn every week on Friday with this show. Okay, that's it. Have a good weekend. See you later.